Hello everyone, welcome to the ITLS Academy. So in today's lecture, we'll discuss about the new topic, that is renal diseases. So let's see the introduction first. Most kidney diseases attack the nephrons, and this damage may leave the kidney unable to remove the waste. So friends, as we know, kidney are essential to having a healthy body. They are mainly responsible for filtering your waste product, excess water and other impurities out of the blood. So these toxins are stored in the bladder and then removed during the urination. Therefore, the kidney also regulate the pH, the salt and potassium level in the body, and they produces the hormone that regulates the blood pressure and the control of production of red blood cells. So kidney even activate a form of vitamin D that helps the body absorb the calcium. So in overall, the kidney is the main organ of the body. It is helpful in maintaining your pH, salt level in your body, and also it excretes out the waste material out of your body. So kidney diseases affect approximately about 26 million of people of adult. It occurs when your kidneys become damaged and cannot perform their function, and this damage may be caused by your diabetes or high blood pressure and various other chronic long-term conditions. And kidney diseases can lead to other health problems including your weak bones, your nerve damage and malnutrition. So causes can include your genetic problem also. It may include any of the injuries or medicines. So you have a higher risk of kidney diseases if you have a diabetes, as I told just now, due to high blood pressure, or a close family member with a kidney diseases. So chronic kidney diseases damages the nephron. Nephron is generally the main functional unit of your kidney. That is, the nephron is the main functional unit of your kidney that performs all the filtration of your urine and all the fluid, your blood stream. So slowly damages the slowly over several years. So other kidney problems includes your cancer, cyst formation in the kidney, stone formation in the kidney, or there occurs an infection in the kidney. And also today we'll deal about these three types of main problem that occurs in the kidney, that main damages caused by your acute renal failure, chronic renal failure and end-stage renal failure, that is ARF, CRF and ESRF. So these are the main topics that we'll cover today. Next is let's see what are the contributing causes. So as I told, ARF, in acute renal failure, it is mainly caused by your hypovolemia, that is the shock, any cardiac failure if there occurs in your body, or sometimes it may occur due to the acute glomerulonephritis, toxic reactions such as, for example, that occurs through your drugs or poison if you are taking, and also caused by your obstructions of urinary output, for example tumor, or if you have the renal stone diseases, means any of kind of stone formation that occurs in your kidney. Next is your chronic renal failure, that is, it may cause by your diabetic nephropathy, your hypertension, or if you are suffering from any of the infection, for example chronic pyelonephritis or sepsis secondary to severe urinary tract infection, polycystic kidney diseases, tumor, familial, for example multiple myeloma and amyloidosis and Alport syndrome. So these are the contributing causes due to which the damages occur to your kidney. And somewhat, if you do not control these problems, do not control these diseases at the time, then it may lead to the end stage of renal failure, that is your ESRF. That is the third stage. So before further moving, let's talk about the nutritional assessment. This is very important. Means before you go for any of the diseases, any of the diet chain, firstly your dietitian or your prescriber person is first know about the patient history, what is the schedule, nutritional assessment. Since from last about 6 to 5 chapters I am talking about nutritional assessment before treatment of any of the diseases. This nutritional assessment is very important step. So nutritional status should be assessed in all the end stage renal failure patient using the standard patients using standard techniques. However, in this presence of renal impairment, biochemical markers required a more specific interpretation of the result due to through which, on the basis of which your diet plan, your nutrition is decided for the particular disease. Patient with serum albumin greater than 25 gram per liter have a risk ratio for dying 20 times higher than the patient with the serum albumin less than 40 gram. So serum albumin requires careful interpretation. It can be influenced by the fluid imbalance and an acute phase response as indicated by increased CRP level, that is the trauma, surgery or infection. So large body pools and long half-life renders the albumin relatively insensitive to immediate the change in nutritional status. Along with this, serum pre-albumin has a shorter half-life and a smaller body pool than albumin and is more influenced by the acute phase response, anemia, and level is elevated by CRP. Along with this also, serum transferrin is also play an important role in the nutritional assessment, as it is not a good indicator of nutritional status in ESFR, as serum level increases in iron deficiency and decreases level occurs in uremia. Next important assessment is depends upon your hemoglobin. Hemoglobin and iron stores should be monitored, as anemia, which is a common CRF and can reduce the quality of life due to its effect on mental function, your exercise tolerance, fatigue, appetite, and also it affects your sleep pattern. So next is your, although increase in blood level along with this as hemoglobin, blood urea is derived from the protein degradation but influenced by your diet, hydration, urine flow. So although increase in blood urea is an indicator of impaired renal function, and in end stage renal failure a low level of may indicate inadequate protein intake and is predictive of a poor prognosis. Serum potassium, so it is a type, in this it is a type of protein consumed, type of protein consumed, degree of anabolism, residual renal function and amount of dialysis will also influence the urea level. So data from urea kinetic modeling can be used indirectly to estimate the protein intake, and on the basis of which your nutritional assessment is proceeded further. Next is your serum potassium. So serum potassium value that is greater than the normal range may indicate a poor nutritional intake, as potassium is found in a wide variety of food. And low serum, in turn, low serum level indicates an overall poor food intake due to your wide distribution of phosphate in the food. So serum, next is your, so low phosphate here, low serum phosphate is may also result as a part of your metabolic imbalance associated with refeeding syndrome. Next is your low lipid profile on the basis. So low total plasma cholesterol level have been associated with increased mortality and possibly as an indicator of insufficient protein and energy intake. So on the basis of these estimation, the your dietitian may plan out your diet basis on the basis of your particular disease you are going through it. Next is your nutritional requirement in different conditions. First is chronic renal failure. So in this regard, the energy requirement are normal. For example, approximately 35 kilocalories per kg per day is required. Some patients may be underweighted and therefore they may require the additional calories. Next, along with this, we have to keep in mind about the protein intake, and it should be maintained at 0.8 to 1 gram per kg ideal for the ideal body weight per day. And especially in patient consuming excessive protein or in short-term management of uremic patient awaiting the start of dialysis, protein restriction has been used to reduce the uremic symptoms and decrease the rate of decline in renal functions. Next requirement is your phosphate. So early restrictions may be helpful in prevent your renal bone diseases and secondary hyperparathyroidism, and may slow the progression to end stage renal failure. Fourth one is your fluid and potassium restrictions, and are usually necessary in chronic renal failure unless the urine output is markedly reduced, less than 1000 ml per day, and poorly controlled diabetic patient. Last one is your sodium intake. Sodium intake, for this guideline you can do refer to your previous lectures also. In those lectures I have discussed so many times about the sodium intake. So sodium intake, a mild restriction of 80 to 100 millimole may be required if the patient are hypertensive or oedematous. Next is your nutritional requirement in hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. Means these are the nutrients that is required for those patients which are kept for the dialysis. So in end stage renal failure, appetite and food intake may gradually improve once dialysis has begun and uremic symptoms have been alleviated. So general healthy eating guidelines are recommended. For example, 50% of the total energy from complex CHO, high fiber NSP, and 30 to 35% energy of fat should be required. That is a normal diet for the patient, those who are kept for the dialysis. So here I was talking about the hemodialysis. First let me clear you. In hemodialysis, what happens? The blood is pumped through a special machine that generally filters out your waste product and fluid. So, and hemodialysis is done at your home or in the hospital or dialysis center, and most people have 3 sessions per week, with each session lasting 3 to 5 hours. So hemodialysis can also be done in shorter, more frequent sessions if the infection is more or the patient condition is somewhat critical. So several weeks before starting hemodialysis, most people will have a surgery to create an arteriovenous fistula. An arteriovenous fistula is created by connecting an artery to a vein just below the skin, typically in the forearm. The larger blood vessel allows an increased amount of blood to flow continuously through the body during the hemodialysis treatment, and this means more blood can be filtered and purified. So an intravenous graft, that is a looped plastic tube, is used, may be implanted, can be used for the same purpose if an artery and vein can be joined together. So the most common side effect of hemodialysis is low blood pressure and muscle cramping may occur sometime, and person may feel some itchiness problem. Whereas if we talk about the peritoneal dialysis, in this dialysis the peritoneum means the membrane that lines the abdominal wall stands in for the kidney. The tube is implanted and used to fill the abdomen with the fluid called the dialysate. Waste product in the blood flow from the peritoneum into the dialysate, and the dialysate is then drained from the abdomen. So there are generally 2 forms of peritoneal dialysis. First is your continuous ambulatory peritoneal dialysis, where the abdomen is filled and drained several times during the day. And second one is continuous cycler assisted peritoneal dialysis, which uses a machine to cycle the fluid in and out of the abdomen at night while the person is asleep. So the most common side effect of this is infection in the abdominal cavity may occur sometimes, or where the tube is implanted, and other side effect may include your weight gain and hernia. So we do not have to go deep inside about the hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis, that I have told for your knowledge purpose. What the important thing is, what type of nutrition is given to in these types of patient, those who are kept for hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. Firstly, the energy required for them is 30 to 35 kilocalorie for patient who are at hemodialysis, and somewhat less energy, 25 to 30 calorie for those patients those who are kept for peritoneal dialysis. The main source, they may take their cereal, bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, sugar, fats. That is more than enough for this energy. Protein is required in 1 to 1.2 grams per kg for HD patient, and for PD patient 1 to 2 to 1.3 grams per kg is required. For this they can go for meat, fish, egg, pulses and wheat and whatever within allowance. Potassium requirement is generally 0.8 to 1 millimole, and it is restrictions only necessary if hypercalcemia, that is restricted in PD patient. So you can go for fruit, vegetable, fruit juice, nuts, coffee, chocolate, grapes. For these nutrients can be are allowed for the potassium intake. For phosphate, the required quantity should be given, and milk, yogurt, cheese or fish with bones should be given to the patient. For sodium source, as I told, 80 to 100 millimole, no added salt is required. Same quantity for the peritoneal also, and you can go for table salt, smoked curd, foods, tin and packed foods, ready meals you can opt for. For fluid, if we talk about 50 ml and previous day urine output, and it is same for peritoneal dialysis patient also, 500 ml plus previous day urine output and ultrafiltration. You can go for fluid intake as drink, gravies, sauces, soup, jelly and yogurt. So these all are the nutrition diet chart that is given. The food requirements is given as per their need, or about and according to their amount. This for those patients who are kept under the dialysis in both the conditions. Next is your nutritional requirement in ARF, means acute renal failure patient. What are the types of nutrient required in this condition? For this, nutritional status in ARF is usually influenced by underlying etiology of diseases, that pre-existing malnutrition, degree of catabolism and prolonged hospitalization. Severely catabolic acute renal failure patient usually requires prompt nutritional support. So the increased availability of dialysis and continuous filtration technique means the nutritional status no longer need to be compromised in order to control the electrolyte and fluid balance. So for this provision of adequate energy is essential to prevent the breakdown of the endogenous and ingested protein for gluconeogenesis. Patients with ARF but no additional catabolic stress are usually able to maintain neural and positive nitrogen balance. So energy requirement are determined from the energy expenditure, your clinical circumstances, protein, patient activity and predicted BMR calculated from Schofield equation. Next is your protein. If we talk about the ARF with no additional catabolic stress are usually able to maintain the neutral and positive nitrogen balance. So catabolic patient may have a marked rise in blood urea nitrogen as nitrogen balance becomes negative. Urea nitrogen appearance can be measured to estimate the total nitrogen balance of, and protein requirement can be estimated using this standard formula. So dialysis dependent patient are required additional protein to replace the losses during the dialysis. Next is your urea nitrogen appearance can be measured to estimate the total nitrogen balance, as I told. Can be estimated using the standard formula and corrected patient activity and underlying the clinical condition. Last one is conservatively managed patient usually requires dietary restriction and potassium, sodium and phosphate. Patient undergoing continuous renal replacement therapy, that is CRRT, needs a less reductive diet. So during CCRT, many acute renal failure patient develops a kind of hypokalemia, hypophosphatemia and hypomagnesemia and requires supplementation. So these are important metabolic derangements, especially in ventilated patient, as electrolyte depletion can lead to increasing muscle weakness, and sometimes it may results in alteration in acid-base balance and to further nephrotoxicity. So for this, the type of nutrition which are provided to the patient is very important, and it should be kept in mind that the dietitian should keep in mind and should go for nutritional assessment of the patient. Next comes your nephrotic syndrome. So what is nephrotic syndrome? Generally nephrotic syndrome is caused, let's see first its characteristics. So proteinuria, that is greater than 3 grams per day, hypoalbuminemia and generalized oedema. These are the following characteristics of the person who is suffering from nephrotic syndrome (NS). The following are also often observed, that it goes under the hyperlipidemia, clotting problem and hypertension. So how nephrotic syndrome is caused? It caused by your focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. About 30% of the patient is of having nephrotic syndrome is caused due to this. Membranous nephropathy occurs in 25%. Diabetes is also responsible to cause the nephrotic syndrome, and minimal change in nephropathy and amyloidosis and other include systematic lupus erythematosus or hemoglobin A nephropathy, toxic glomerulopathy caused by gold and penicillamine are the causes of a person who is suffering from nephrotic syndrome. Its treatment include that it aims to control the oedema, reduce the proteinuria and treat the complications that arises, including your infection, your hyperlipidemia and clotting problems. So diet therapy in this has a great role to play in several of these areas. Firstly, if we talk about the oedema, so oedema is one of the main feature of nephrotic syndrome. This may present as a swollen ankle or periorbital swelling and pleural effusions. The oedema is due to the sodium and water retention of the patient and benefit from the dietary sodium restrictions. If the patient is able to maintain 80 to 100 millimole per day of sodium restrictions, can potentiate the nephrotic syndrome problem. And antihypertensive and anti-proteinuric effect of ACE inhibitor. It also results in proteinuria, that is treating the lesion that underlies the NS is possible in case of MCN and to lesser extent. So in this condition, the FSGS which respond to steroid, however MCN only account for 10% of the cases. Hyperlipidemia is also the characteristics of nephrotic syndrome, and both the triglyceride and cholesterols are raised in nephrotic syndrome due to the increased level of synthesis of lipoprotein and also increased level of metabolism of triglyceride. So incidence of myocardial infarctions has been reported by 5 to 6 greater in size. Sometimes infection is also occurs in nephrotic syndrome. That is, the nephrotic syndrome patient are prone to infections possibly because of loss of protective immunoglobulins. Iron, copper, zinc and vitamin D are also lost as a result of proteinuria, and due to this vitamin D losses can result in derangements of calcium metabolism and supplementation may be necessary. So a balanced nutritional diet will help to maintain the micronutrients level. For this, you have to maintain the protein up to 0.8 to 1 gram per kg ideal body weight per day. Calories is required in normal requirement, that is, you have to maintain your calorie in between 30 to 35 kilocalories. Fat should be greater than 30% total kilocalories. Low saturated fat and increase monosaturated fatty acids and polysaturated fatty acids. Micronutrients such as ensures adequate intake of and monitor to sign vitamin D deficiency. Sodium should be maintained in between 80 to 100 millimoles per day and potassium monitor as increases with ACE inhibitor. Next problem comes your renal transplantation. So renal transplantation is considered to offer the patient with ESF, those who are at the condition of end stage renal failure, and the best chance of rehabilitation and to live a good quality of life. So a patient may have spent several of years on dialysis and possibly a couple of years in the pre-dialysis stage before receiving a transplant. Even with careful management, they will be showing sign of long-term metabolic effect of chronic renal failure, including anemia, bone disease, muscles wasting and cardiovascular diseases. So for this, immunosuppressive therapy, which is used to prolong the life of transplanted kidney, is associated with many of the side effects. This immunosuppressive treatment is associated with many side effects. In this case, along with your anemia, bone diseases, as I told, the patient may go through the protein hypercatabolism, increased appetite leading to obesity, or he or she may suffer from hyperlipidemia or glucose intolerance or high risk of diabetes, hyperkalemia, and increased risk of cancer and increased infection risk, gum hypertrophy. These are the problems, these are the side effects which comes across during the immunosuppressive therapy in renal transplantation. So a positive effect of transplantation are to relieve the patient from dietary and other lifestyle restrictions imposed by dialysis. Patient experience a general improvement in well-being. Waste products that were cause of uremic symptoms are removed more efficiently, and they no longer have to undertake the exhausting process of dialysis. The nutritional care should be the same as for any of the other post-surgical patients, such as monitoring biochemistry and urine output, ensuring the return of normal gut function and appetite, and also meeting the requirements with supplement if necessary. So treatment varies accordingly, from fluid and electrolyte restrictions to intravenous support if urine output is excessive and serum electrolyte level drop below the normal. Dehydration at this stage can damage the new kidney. So this should be kept in mind during the renal transplantation, and it is the point of care, just we have to take it in mind after immediate post transplant. Now once the kidney function has improved and stabilized, the main aim of dietary therapy are to encourage a healthy balanced diet and reduce the risk factor of cardiovascular diseases, which is the cause of 60% of death in transplanted patient. So incidence of obesity can increase the dramatically post transplantation, and dietary advices should be given to the patient prior to the hospital discharge with regular follow up in the outpatient clinics in order to prevent the excessive weight gain. So as the patient is more susceptible to the infection, some advices should be on food hygiene and safe handling of the food is also be useful for the patient, and it should be given by the doctor and dietitian to the patient. And along with this, once the renal transplantation is occur, you have to also control your weight, control your diet also, and should take the diet properly as per the guidance that is provided by your doctor. Nutrition for renal transplantation. Here are some of the nutrition that is required. Firstly, monitor the biochemistry as I told, especially for your blood cholesterol, triglyceride, glucose, bone minerals, PTH and hemoglobin. Monitor the blood pressure control regularly. Aim for acceptable body mass index, means you have to be in limited body mass index, be in limited weight. You do not have to gain weight and also do not have to lose weight after the transplantation. Balance of good health is an appropriate food model too, is means you have to take a balanced good food. Emphasize eating on good variety of fruits and vegetables. Encourage high fiber foods. Encourage fish, particularly oily fish, lean meats and pulses. Food high in sugar, saturated fat and salt should be used sparingly. Encourage decrease fat dairy products. Ensure calcium requirements are met. Advise alcohol within usual recommendation, means 2 to 3 units per day. Be aware of good food hygiene practices. Encourage physical activity and regular exercise, and avoid smoking too much sun exposure. Next comes your renal stone diseases. So stone formation, that is of 2 to 4x more frequent in men than women, usually appearing after the age of 30 with the recurrence rate of 50% within 10 years. So 10% of men and 5% of women may suffer from the kidney stone in their lifetime. So stone formation, let's see. Renal stone formation can occur anywhere in the kidney, ureter or bladder. So the size of stone can vary from microscopic to large staghorn calculi and can lead to kidney failure if the kidney urinary tract becomes obstructed by that particular stone. The stone vary in composition and analysis and is useful in order to help to determine the causes, means the analysis of your type of composition of the stone is very important, on the basis of which you can decide by which you have caused you have suffering from the stone, how the stone is occurred. Biochemical risk factor includes increased urinary concentration of promoter substances and decreased concentration of inhibitor substances. So stone formation is exacerbated by decreased urine output volume, and this may result from a low fluid intake or increased losses via other routes including sweat, for example in tropical areas, gastrointestinal tract, your intestinal failure. So about 50% of the stone formers excrete higher urinary calcium, that is greater than 7.5 millimole per day in men and greater than 6.2 millimole per day in women. So hypercalciuria may be due to the increased absorption of calcium from the gut, calcium reabsorption from the bone, or PTH, or decreased ability of the kidney tubes to reabsorb the calcium. Sometimes vitamin D and PTH level may be normal or elevated. Only 5% of the patient have an elevated PTH. Here are the composition and incidence and causes of main type of stone. Firstly, the composition, if your stone is made up of calcium oxalate, means up to 50% may contain calcium hydroxyl phosphate. So incidence is 75%, and possible causes may be your idiopathic hypercalciuria, first degree of hyperparathyroidism, decrease in urine citrate, hyperolaxalia and hypouremia, and hyperuricemia. Second is your magnesium, if the composition consists of your magnesium ammonium phosphate. So it would be possible when any bacterial infection is there. So possible causes is your bacterial infection. Third is if your stone is totally made up of uric acid, means low urine pH and hyperuricemia. Fourth one is your cystine. So these are the composition of how the kidney stone is found, or of which composition, which element. So, the main cause of cystine stone is cystinuria. So there are some of the dietary treatment of renal stone diseases are here. A number of dietary factors can contribute to the management of stone diseases, especially those that influence the appearance in the urine. The diet of the affluent world has been scrutinized with respect of intake of animal food, sodium, calcium oxalate and purine. If you talk about the fluid, so in fluid, an adequate fluid intake of 2 to 3 liters per day is encouraged to ensure a urine output of greater than 2 liters per day. Specifically, patients are told to drink 250 ml every 4 walking hours plus 250 ml at meals. So new stone formation within 5 years may be prevented is in up to 60% of the patient with idiopathic calcium urolithiasis, and the average interval for recurrence can be increased from 2 to 3 years. Next is your calcium. There are a number of dietary factors that can cause the hypercalciuria. Restriction is not advisable, and the aim is to meet the recommended nutrient intake for calcium for 700 to 800 mg per day. A moderate intake of 2 to 3 gram per day sodium is recommended, and increased animal protein intake can promote stone formation in a number of ways. So it will increase the acidity of the urine due to the breakdown of sulfur containing amino acids, calcium, uric acid, and also increases the cystine excretion. So when these excretions are higher, then obviously your kidney will get the formation of a stone within kidney. So intake of 1 gram protein per kg body weight is thought to be appropriate for your nutrient as a nutrition. Next is your oxalate. Oxalate is mostly formed endogenously. If 24 hours urinary oxalate is greater than 440 millimole, check for ioxalate containing foods and mega doses of vitamin C, pyridoxine supplements, which may increases your stone formation. So oxalate absorption from the gut increases with decrease in calcium intake, or if the competition for the absorption decreases, for example fatty acid malabsorptions. And also a high intake of food with highly bioavailable oxalates such as rhubarb or spinach can increases the urinary oxalate excretion to near or above the normal limits, resulting in the urinary calcium oxalate concentration reaching to the saturated point. Next is your purine. Uric acid is an end product of the purine metabolism, and dietary restrictions of the purine and animal protein will decrease in urinary excretion. So acidic urine will precipitate uric acid salts, and alkalinization has been achieved with citrate salt, and orange juice is high in citrate without containing too much oxalate. So if for 24 hours urinary uric acid is more than 4 millimole, check for increased purine containing foods. If uric acid stones are identified, then drinking orange juice may be helpful in preventing the formation of stones. Last one is others, that potassium, magnesium, fiber, fruit and vegetable are associated with the decreased risk, and in decreased refined carbohydrate may increases the risk of stone formation. Thank you for being with us. I hope you have understood all the types of diseases, what are the problems caused by renal failure or renal diseases. For more information related to this, you can log on to my website www.itlisacademy.com and register yourself. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, LinkedIn, and yes, do not forget to subscribe our channel ITLS Academy at YouTube. Thank you.